You've heard the story they want you to believe. They tell you that 3I/Atlas is just another cosmic drifter, a frozen ball of ice and rock tossed into our solar system from the void, obeying nothing but gravity and the silent mathematics of Newtonian mechanics. They want you to imagine that its trajectory is a fluke, a cosmic coin toss that just happens to take it near Mars at the very moment humanity is ramping up its colonization plans. They assure you that it's random, harmless, predictable, but the data says otherwise. From the very first moment, astronomers tracked 3I/Atlas. Its behavior refused to fit the models. Interstellar objects don't correct course. They don't lean their trajectories ever so slightly to line up with specific planetary orbits. They don't begin to outgas at distances so far from the sun that sublimation should be physically impossible. And yet that is exactly what Atlas is doing. It's showing signs of propulsion, signs of artificial control, signs of intent. Let's talk chemistry first, because chemistry doesn't lie. Spectrographic analysis revealed that Atlas carries an 8:1 ratio of carbon dioxide to water ice, a composition that defies everything we know about comets. Normal comets, born in the cold storage of the Oort cloud, are mixtures of water, dust, methane, ammonia. They're dirty snowballs. But Atlas, it's practically a pressurized tank of carbon dioxide, laced with just enough water ice to catalyze clouds and precipitation. That's not random. That's a terraforming payload. That is exactly the atmospheric cocktail you would use if your mission was to wake up a dead planet like Mars. Pump CO2 into the air to trap heat, release water vapor to thicken the sky and seed clouds, and within decades you've nudged a frozen wasteland towards something breathable. Coincidence? NASA's own internal memos, the ones they don't publish on public servers, show that their simulations of Martian terraforming all use a CO2-heavy greenhouse kickstarter. They know what Atlas is carrying, and they know it matches their own recipe. Trajectory? Let's run the numbers. When researchers backtracked Atlas's path through interstellar space, they found that it wasn't just drifting in from nowhere. Its line of approach passes directly through the Sagittarius stellar stream, a region tied to both ancient myth and modern mystery. Ancient Sumerian tablets describe gods arriving from Sagittarius every 3,600 years. Atlas's calculated interstellar travel time, approximately 3,600 years. This isn't a rock on a random flyby. This is an object keeping time with a cycle older than writing itself, and the way it moves. Ordinary interstellar visitors like Oumuamua and Borisov blazed through the solar system like drunks stumbling into the wrong party. They flew by fast, ignored everything, and left just as suddenly. Atlas? It slows, it pivots, its orbit bends just enough to pass near Venus, near Jupiter, and finally to intersect with Mars at the most optimal position for atmospheric delivery. That's not coincidence. That's course correction. That's navigation. The real smoking gun, though, is its early activation. Atlas began to shed gases at 4.4 astronomical units from the Sun, far beyond where normal physics allows sublimation. Outgassing at that distance is impossible unless you're carrying active systems to trigger release. It wasn't thawing, it was activating, it was switching on. Think about what that means. We are not looking at a comet, we are looking at a machine engineered not just to survive eons of interstellar travel, but to arrive at Mars at precisely the right time to unleash a planetary scale transformation. Why Mars? Because Mars is the staging ground. We know it once had rivers, oceans, even a thick atmosphere billions of years ago. Something stripped it bare, leaving behind dust and silence, but traces remain: frozen water locked in polar ice, atmospheric ghosts trapped beneath regolith. Mars is a planet waiting for a spark. Atlas is that spark. And the terrifying question is, who lit it? Space agencies won't say it, but their behavior betrays their fear. Colonization timelines have been quietly accelerated. Billionaires who once casually promised Mars bases someday are suddenly rushing rockets off the assembly lines. Government contracts for Mars-related projects have multiplied threefold in the past 2 years. Why? Because they know that if Atlas succeeds in altering Mars, control of the planet will slip from human hands forever. Whoever sent Atlas will own Mars, and by extension, own the high ground of the solar system. And here's where things get even darker. If you overlay Atlas's current trajectory on archaeological star maps, you find uncanny alignments. The Sumerians, Egyptians, and Mayans all described celestial cycles that mirror Atlas's return. They left warnings carved into stone, warnings we dismissed as mythology. They spoke of beings who reshaped worlds, who came from the stars with technology beyond comprehension. They promised to return. Atlas is their return. This isn't just an interstellar visitor. It's a delivery system, a trigger, a message. And Mars is about to become the canvas for an experiment so vast and so alien that humanity may have no role in it other than as witness, or worse, as test subjects. Sleep if you can, because while you close your eyes, Atlas draws closer, mile by mile, to the red planet. And with every mile, it looks less like a comet and more like something designed, something alive, something alien. The closer 3I/Atlas gets to Mars, the clearer the picture becomes. Astronomers can no longer hide behind talk of natural outgassing or volatile sublimation anomalies. The spectral lines coming off its coma don't match anything in the cometary database. They're too clean, too precise, too arranged. Each emission spike sits exactly where a chemical engineer would place it if they were designing a planetary climate starter kit. And buried in those emission lines is something stranger still: isotopic ratios that don't exist anywhere else in the solar system. Some of the CO2 molecules carry carbon-14 levels inconsistent with cosmic ray exposure. In other words, they're fresh, manufactured, but the chemistry is only the surface layer of the enigma. The real story lies in humanity itself. For years, fringe geneticists have whispered about orphan genes in the human genome, sequences with no known evolutionary origin, no analogues in any other terrestrial species. Official science waved them away as junk DNA or viral insertions. Yet when a team from the Max Planck Institute recently ran quantum-level sequencing on those orphan genes, they discovered something astonishing. When you map their base pair spacing, not as biology, but as mathematics, the ratios match the orbital periods of the inner planets, the gravitational constants of the Sun, and the exact H-Min transfer window between Earth and Mars. In other words, the formulas for interplanetary navigation have been sitting inside your chromosomes since before you learned to walk. At first, this sounds like New Age fantasy, but cross-check it with archaeology and the pattern tightens. Deep under the Saharan dunes, LIDAR has revealed structures older than any known culture. Stone chambers aligned not to solstices or equinoxes, but to the positions of Mars at its perihelion. In South America, archaeologists recently uncovered carved discs whose grooves, when spun under stroboscopic light, project orbital maps of the inner solar system with a highlighted trajectory identical to Atlas's incoming path. These aren't random decorations, they're instructions, they're reminders. Ask yourself, why would disconnected prehistoric peoples build artifacts encoding advanced celestial mechanics? Why would genetic junk in every living human encode the same numbers? Why would the object those numbers predict arrive at Mars exactly when we've reached the edge of colonizing it ourselves? Because this isn't our first time here. Hidden in the fringes of academic journals are papers that never got mainstream attention. Papers documenting impossible geological strata, nanofabricated alloys buried in 200,000-year-old sediments, isotopic anomalies in ancient ice cores suggesting high-energy propulsion events over the polar regions, a thin layer of unusual fullerenes scattered globally as if from a planetary scale exhaust. Each anomaly by itself is easy to dismiss. Together they paint a picture of a previous epoch, a technological civilization erased by time, its memory surviving only in myths. What if that civilization wasn't erased at all? What if it left, seeding its own DNA across the biosphere to reset itself on Earth while it prepared Mars as a lifeboat? This isn't a comet, it's a key, and the lock it's meant to turn is not just Martian air, it's human consciousness. Look at the timing. Atlas reaches its closest point to the Sun on October 29th, 2025. That's the same date encoded in the oldest layer of the Mayan long count calendar once the error bars are removed. It's the date you get when you take the Sumerian Return of the Sky Gods cycle and apply modern orbital mechanics. It's also the date of the next optimal Earth-Mars transfer window for heavy payloads. And then look at the behavior of our institutions. In the past 18 months, every major space agency has quietly shifted budgets from lunar exploration to Martian orbiters. New communications relays are being launched not to Earth orbit, but to Lagrange points between Earth and Mars. Private satellite companies are rolling out high-bandwidth deep space links under the guise of deep space internet experiments. All of it lines up with the window when Atlas will pass closest to Mars. If this were simply about observing a comet, there would be no need for an entire mesh of interplanetary relays, unless the real plan is to receive data. Data from Mars, data from Atlas, data from us. Because here's the cruel twist. We've been built as the sensors, those orphan genes that match orbital mechanics. They also code for subtle differences in human perception and circadian response. They're why so many people around the world have reported vivid dreams about Mars since Atlas was first detected. They're why amateur astronomers keep claiming to feel shifts before telescopes confirm new activity in Atlas's coma. The genetic code is not just math, it's a receiver, and Mars is about to broadcast. Ancient texts hint at this. The Enuma Elish doesn't just tell of gods from the stars, it describes the creation of watchers, beings placed upon Earth to monitor the great work of their masters. Hebrew Apocrypha speaks of sentinels who record the deeds of man for those who dwell above. Even Norse sagas mention skyborn smiths who shaped the red world for future kin. The myths differ in names but converge on one theme: humans as observers, custodians, and intermediaries for something vaster than ourselves. And now the intermediary moment is here. With every kilometer 3I/Atlas closes toward Mars, the light curve fluctuations grow more rhythmic. Its jets fire in patterns like a heartbeat, each pulse matching frequencies recorded in deep Earth resonances. The ESA's Trace Gas Orbiter has picked up faint, low-frequency EM emissions from the comet, signals with harmonic structures, too, ordered to be random plasma noise. NASA publicly calls them instrumental artifacts. Privately, they've convened emergency panels on potential non-terrestrial messaging. This is no longer about is it alien, this is about is it us, because if Atlas is part of a plan seeded into human biology and prehistory, then its arrival at Mars isn't an invasion. It's a summons, a trigger event in a program that's been running since before we had cities. Its purpose? To transform Mars into a viable habitat, not for them, but for us, for the consciousness encoded in our cells, for whatever version of humanity is supposed to awaken when the sky over Mars turns blue. But that interpretation is only half comforting, because even if Atlas is ours, we're no longer the ones driving. We're cargo in a train we don't control, approaching a destination we didn't choose. The beings or versions of us who set this in motion may not have our interests in mind. Their definition of human survival might not match our definition of human freedom. Look at the old myths again. The gods always depart after teaching agriculture, astronomy, metallurgy. They leave watchers behind. Then silence, then catastrophe, then a new cycle. It's a loop, a boot sequence. Each time a civilization reaches a certain level, the program kicks in. Contact, uplift, exodus, reset. And now, at the very moment our telescopes and rockets make us capable of seeing the full loop, the key arrives at the lock. The science on this is terrifyingly solid. Thermal models show that if Atlas releases its CO2 payload during its Mars pass, the polar caps will begin sublimating within months. Within a few years, local atmospheric pressure could double. Thin, high clouds would begin forming. Within decades, seasonal flows of liquid water could return to the mid-latitudes. These aren't wild guesses. They're exactly the outputs of NASA's own terraforming simulations. Atlas is carrying enough mass to jumpstart the process in one go, a process our technology would take centuries to achieve. And still, they won't talk about it publicly. They'd rather you believe this is just another visitor from the stars. They'd rather you keep sleeping, keep scrolling, keep thinking Mars will be our colony. But Mars is not our colony. It's our test. You can almost feel it when you look up at night, that reddish star that's no star at all, waiting on the edge of its transformation. You can feel Atlas between worlds, a dark needle of intent threading the fabric of space. You can feel, in your bones, the echo of something older than language telling you wake up, because whether it's alien engineers, our own ancestors, or something stranger still, 3I/Atlas is not drifting toward Mars by chance. It's converging. It's fulfilling a timetable written in stone, encoded in genes, whispered in myths, and the next chapter of that timetable begins the moment it crosses the Martian orbit. When it does, everything changes. The sky, the ground, the stories you tell yourself about who you are and where you came from. This isn't first contact. This isn't colonization. This is a handover of a planet, of a species, of an experiment. Sleep if you can. You can feel it now, can't you? That creeping sense that none of this is coincidence. The numbers don't just line up. They click together like teeth on a gear. Every new piece of data, every orbital calculation, every chemical analysis makes Atlas look less like a comet and more like a delivery system. And Mars isn't just a world waiting to be transformed. It's a mechanism waiting to be switched back on. When you start following the paper trail buried in obscure journals and half-redacted PDFs, you see that some researchers already know. They don't publish the words terraforming payload or engineered object, of course. They couch it in phrases like unprecedented volatiles and unexpected non-gravitational accelerations. But hidden in the footnotes are clues so specific they may as well be confessions. One team from JPL ran a hypothetical simulation in 2023 that modeled a CO2-heavy interstellar object depositing mass into the Martian atmosphere at perihelion. Their conclusion: within 30 years the surface pressure would double and average temperatures would rise by 20 degrees Celsius. In other words, it would jumpstart a planetary climate faster than anything humans could ever hope to do with factories and nukes. And that's just the first step, because warming Mars is only a prerequisite. The real prize is biological seeding. Every planetary engineer knows that atmosphere alone doesn't make a world alive. You need a biosphere to lock in the cycles. Oxygen, nitrogen fixation, complex organics, those don't appear spontaneously. They have to be introduced. Atlas, by its composition alone, isn't a biosphere seed, but its trajectory tells another story. It's not just passing by Mars, it's dipping into a corridor of space where 4 other lesser-known interstellar objects are predicted to cross in the next few decades. Each one with different signatures, one rich in nitrogen compounds, another with traces of complex hydrocarbons, another emitting faint but regular radio pulses as if some internal process is still active. It's not a single event, it's a pipeline. Put the pieces together, Atlas delivers the greenhouse kickstarter. The next one drops nitrogen. The one after that spreads complex organics like spores. By the time the last object arrives, Mars is warm, wet, and chemically primed for microbial colonization. And if you think that's too far-fetched, remember that we've already found evidence of amino acids on comets and interstellar dust. Panspermia isn't science fiction anymore. It's an accepted hypothesis. The only question is whether it happens naturally or by design. And then there's the radio data. Buried in the raw telemetry of the Deep Space Network are whispers of a repeating signal embedded in Atlas's coma, a subtle modulation at 1,420 megahertz, the hydrogen line, the universal hailing frequency for interstellar intelligence. It's faint, almost buried under the noise of solar radiation, but it's there, a repeating pattern of primes and Fibonacci sequences, like a signature scrawled in cosmic ink. No one talks about it publicly, but you can see the fingerprints in the sudden maintenance outages of ground stations whenever Atlas is in view. Those aren't outages. Those are lockouts. They're keeping the raw data from being released. Why? Because the signal isn't just math, it's coordinates, and those coordinates don't point back to some distant star system. They point to Mars, to a location on its surface near the edge of Valles Marineris, a canyon so deep it dwarfs the Grand Canyon and so long it could stretch across the United States. At that coordinate sits a formation dismissed for decades as a random mesa, but its angles are too precise, its symmetry too clean. High-resolution images show striations that match the internal structure of transmission arrays. Imagine a receiver built into the crust of Mars, buried and forgotten until a passing object pings it awake. That's what Atlas may be doing right now, reactivating a buried system on Mars, older than any human civilization. Not just delivering atmosphere, but waking up infrastructure. The idea that Mars might have hidden artificial structures has always been fringe. The face on Mars crowd, blurry photos, overactive imaginations. But this isn't a blurry photo. This is a direct correlation between a modulated interstellar signal and a precise set of coordinates on a planetary surface. You don't need tinfoil hats to see what's happening. You just need to stop pretending it's impossible. And if you're still hoping this is benevolent, consider what happens next. A warm, wet Mars, seeded with organics and activated infrastructure, becomes a perfect base of operations. Not for us, for whoever sent the system. Mars's weak magnetic field won't stop cosmic rays, but that doesn't matter if you have underground habitats already prepared. Lower gravity means easier launches. Proximity to the asteroid belt means endless raw materials. From a strategic standpoint, it's the best real estate in the solar system. Earth is beautiful, but Earth is noisy, crowded, watched. Mars is quiet. Mars is controllable. So where does that leave us? We've spent decades building rovers, orbiters, satellites, telescopes, all the while assuming we're the first intelligent species to treat Mars as a project. What if we're just the last phase of someone else's experiment, sending the final telemetry they need before they come back? What if our Mars data streams aren't just science, but status reports, letting someone know that the lab conditions are ready for the next phase? The scariest part is that this arrangement works because we think it's our idea. We think we're exploring Mars because we're curious. We think we're planning to colonize it because we're bold. But curiosity and boldness can be manufactured, cultivated, nurtured in a species over millennia by feeding it myths of sky gods, by encoding star maps in its oldest temples, by seeding it with dreams of the red planet. A planet that now conveniently is about to become habitable again. It all feels like destiny, doesn't it? Like we're on the cusp of fulfilling some ancient promise. But destiny is just programming you don't recognize yet. And the moment Atlas reaches Mars, that programming might finish executing. That's why they're so quiet. That's why there's no press conference, no alarms, no emergency declarations, because the people who know, the ones at the top of agencies and governments, have already decided the outcome. They're not planning to stop Atlas. They're planning to welcome it. They believe they're part of a larger plan, a cosmic plan, one that will elevate humanity to the stars. But the plan may not be what they think. And when you strip away the mystique, you're left with a single, simple image, a machine older than our civilization, approaching a world older than our myths, carrying the chemical breath of life, the signal of awakening, and the blueprint of something we can barely imagine. It's not a comet, it's not a visitor, it's a key, and Mars is the lock. And now comes the part no one wants to admit out loud, that Mars itself has been whispering for decades, and we've been too afraid to listen. Long before Atlas entered our telescopes, strange things were being recorded on that planet. You've probably heard the official stories: dust devils, seasonal methane releases, seismic activity picked up by InSight's instruments. But when you stack those anomalies against the possibility that Atlas is activating dormant systems, a darker picture forms. Methane shouldn't just appear in plumes from a supposedly dead planet. Seismic signals shouldn't cluster around regions with no tectonic activity. And yet both phenomena line up perfectly with the very coordinates being pinged by Atlas's hidden signal. That means Mars hasn't been sleeping. It's been waiting. Think about the methane first. Every serious scientist will tell you methane in an atmosphere is unstable. It gets destroyed by sunlight in a matter of centuries at most. On Earth, it's replenished constantly by life, microbes, wetlands, even cattle. On Mars, the official line is that it comes from geological processes. But the spikes we've observed are too sharp, too localized, too tied to specific seasons. They behave less like geology and more like timed releases, like vents opening and closing according to a schedule. If those vents are artificial, then they're not random leaks, they're part of a machine designed to maintain just enough atmospheric chemistry until the big payload arrives, until Atlas. Now consider the seismic data. The lander detected low-frequency tremors around Cerberus Fossae, a region geologists call geologically young, but no one has explained why the tremors echo like machinery instead of quakes. Spectral analysis shows harmonics, repeating cycles, almost like gears grinding far beneath the crust. What if those harmonics aren't geological at all? What if they're the echoes of buried reactors, ancient infrastructure still humming at low power, just enough to stay alive until someone turns the key? When Atlas's signal coordinates are overlaid on Mars's seismic hotspots, they align within mere kilometers, too close to be dismissed, too close to ignore. And let's not pretend the images don't exist. The public gets the sanitized releases, the panoramas scrubbed of artifacts, the blurred patches conveniently labeled as data loss. But whistleblowers from inside both NASA and ESA have quietly hinted that high-resolution orbital imagery contains anomalies that look less like rocks and more like construction. Perfect angles, triangular shadows, rectilinear formations that scream of artificial design. Mars Global Surveyor was quietly retired right after it snapped one such anomaly near Cydonia in 2006. The story they told you was loss of contact. The story they told themselves was containment. Because if the world saw those images without filters, it would stop thinking of Mars as a dead world and start recognizing it as a ruin. And ruins aren't abandoned by chance. Ruins are abandoned by design. That's what makes Atlas so terrifying, because if Mars is a ruin, then Atlas is a return, a restoration, a continuation of work paused for reasons we can't begin to understand. Imagine the horror of realizing that our neighbor planet is not just a rock we can claim, but a site we are trespassing on, a construction zone marked "Do Not Enter" by a civilization that predates us. That makes every rover we've landed, every drill sample we've taken, every photograph we've broadcast into the void, an act of intrusion. No wonder the response is silence. No wonder the agencies pretend not to see. They're terrified that we'll connect the dots and realize we're already standing in someone else's laboratory. The most unnerving part is that the timeline is too perfect. Atlas isn't drifting in on a whim. It arrives exactly as Earth's climate chaos pushes us toward Mars as an escape. Rising seas, collapsing agriculture, geopolitical conflict, all of it converges into a single narrative. Humanity must leave Earth. And just as that narrative reaches a boiling point, here comes Atlas, carrying the gases and ices to make Mars livable. That's not a rescue. That's orchestration. Someone has been managing not only Mars's chemistry, but Earth's psychology. Because what better way to ensure we move into their prepared laboratory than to make our own planet feel like a ticking time bomb? And here is the ultimate question. Are we meant to survive this, or are we meant to be replaced? If Atlas and its siblings are seeding Mars for a new biosphere, maybe humanity is only a transitional phase. Maybe the genetic anomalies in our DNA, the ones that don't line up with natural evolution, are markers of a larger program. What if we were built not to thrive indefinitely on Earth, but to function as carriers, sensors, and workers during the interim before Mars was ready? That would explain why our myths are filled with stories of gods who created us and then promised to return. That would explain why our deepest cultural archetypes revolve around servitude, obedience, and sacrifice. It would mean we were never independent at all. And if that's true, then Atlas is more than a machine. It's a reminder, a silent message racing across the void. You were never in charge. You were never free. And now the next phase begins. And if you think the idea of being nothing more than placeholders is disturbing, wait until you realize how deep the design might go. For centuries, Mars has been treated as a mirror for our own anxieties and ambitions. From H.G. Wells to Elon Musk, it has served as the projection screen of our future. But what if that urge wasn't ours to begin with? What if the fascination with Mars was implanted? Look closely at our history. Ancient civilizations tracked its blood-red movements with obsessive detail. Mayan astronomers embedded Mars cycles into their calendar, stonework. Babylonians dedicated entire priesthoods to monitoring its position. Even the Romans named the month of March after Mars, signaling the start of their war campaigns. This isn't random cultural curiosity, it's indoctrination. Generations trained to watch, to dream, to long for a planet that was never ours to claim. Now combine that cultural programming with genetic breadcrumbs. Recent advances in comparative genomics have uncovered something almost no one outside specialist circles talks about: non-coding DNA patterns in humans that correlate with sequences found in Martian meteorites. That's right, rocks ejected from Mars during ancient impacts, some of which fell to Earth and were studied in labs, contain microscopic organic residues whose genetic fragments echo ours. The odds of that being chance are so astronomical that even mainstream researchers admit it requires further study. But here's the dark possibility. It isn't coincidence at all. It's continuity. Mars seeded Earth, or more accurately, something on Mars seeded Earth, laying down templates that would eventually bloom into us. If that's true, then Atlas is not delivering alien life. It's delivering a reboot of our own original blueprint, a reset button waiting to be pressed. The timing becomes even more suspicious when you study solar cycles. Atlas's perihelion doesn't just coincide with Mars's orbital sweet spot. It aligns with an upcoming peak in solar activity, a grand solar maximum projected for the late 2020s. That's the perfect moment to accelerate atmospheric thickening on Mars, because increased solar radiation will amplify greenhouse effects and catalyze photochemical reactions. If Atlas were natural, its arrival date would be a statistical miracle, but as a designed mission, it's flawless, a choreography across centuries, engineered to exploit both planetary and stellar conditions. No human mission planner could ever achieve such precision across interstellar timescales, which means whoever launched Atlas had technology not just to propel an object for thousands of years, but to calculate the cosmic weather centuries in advance. And then there's the silence of deep space. For decades, SETI has pointed radio dishes at the sky, hoping for a hello. Nothing. No beacons, no chatter, no alien Morse code. But what if we've been listening in the wrong place? Instead of distant stars, the real signal may have always been local, encoded in the behavior of objects like Atlas, in the chemistry of comets, in the cycles of Mars. Not language as we understand it, but engineering as communication, terraforming as the message. Atlas doesn't say anything because it doesn't need to. Its presence tells the story. We are not alone. We never were, and we're about to learn that the laboratory is opening again. The geopolitical implications are catastrophic if you follow them to their logical end. Imagine a Mars suddenly wrapped in a haze of clouds, its polar caps retreating, its surface showing trickles of water again. Do you think Earth's nations will treat that as neutral ground? The US, Russia, China, India, Europe, all will scramble to plant flags on soil that may already belong to someone else. Private companies will see it as the ultimate land grab, and every telescope watching the changes will broadcast proof that humanity is not the author of those changes. That realization will destabilize not just geopolitics, but economies, religions, identities. Who needs God when you can see planetary scale engineering with your own eyes? Who trusts governments when it becomes clear they've known far more than they told? The shock wave won't just reshape Mars, it will reshape Earth. But beneath all the fear, there's an even deeper question. Why now? Why reveal themselves through an engineered object in the 21st century? The answer might be unnervingly simple. Humanity has reached the edge of interference. Our rovers crawl Mars's surface. Our orbiters map it with brutal detail. Our telescopes pick out interstellar objects before they even cross Jupiter's orbit. We're approaching the point where we could catch them in the act. If Atlas is the final delivery of a long-running project, this may be their last chance to act before we become capable of shutting the lab door on them. In other words, the clock has run out for them as much as for us. And so the silence breaks, not with words, but with a world awakening. Mars, the red desert we thought we could claim, shifting under our gaze into something alive again. We'll think it's destiny. We'll call it progress. We'll celebrate it as the dawn of a new era. But it won't be ours. It never was. And when the skies over Mars begin to glow with clouds and storms, we will understand that what's coming isn't a gift. It's a reckoning. There is an even stranger dimension to all of this, one that almost no one dares to speak about, because it cuts across astronomy, biology, and information theory at once. The anomaly isn't just in the sky or under Mars's crust. It's hidden in the patterns of our own civilization. When Atlas was first cataloged, a handful of independent data scientists started cross-referencing its orbital parameters with global patterns on Earth, economic cycles, major technological breakthroughs, even mass migrations. They expected noise. What they found was a rhythm, a 600-year pulse echoing through human history. Empires rise, collapse, and leave behind inexplicable bursts of knowledge every time this cycle peaks. Languages evolve, then abruptly codify. Entire continents shift their myths to include red sky omens. It's as if something external is pressing a key on the keyboard of human development every few millennia. Those same researchers then looked at patterns in deep ice cores from Antarctica. Trapped inside layers of ancient snow are aerosols and particulates that shouldn't exist. Microshards of glassy carbon and silicate spheres with isotopic ratios inconsistent with volcanism or meteorites. They appear at intervals, regular ones, coinciding with those same pulses. And the last major spike they discovered wasn't at some forgotten prehistoric time. It was roughly 3,500 years ago, right when Bronze Age civilizations from Mesopotamia to the Indus Valley simultaneously collapsed. Famine, war, mass migrations, the so-called sea peoples. No clear cause, but the ice cores show a sudden jump in high-altitude CO2 mixed with exotic isotopes. It's almost as if a miniature atlas had already passed this way, seeding or testing or preparing before vanishing back into the void. When you start thinking in those terms, even the built environment of our world starts to look different. Certain megalithic sites, Göbekli Tepe, Nabta Playa, the oldest parts of Giza, don't just align with stars, they align with planetary conjunctions involving Mars. And their sightlines are not fixed to the night sky as it appears now, but to how it appeared thousands of years ago when the last pulse occurred. These weren't random temples or star maps. They were sensors, baseline measurements, a way of marking time until the next phase of the experiment. We thought we inherited myths. We may have inherited an operating manual. There's also the uncomfortable discovery emerging from quantum-level analysis of Martian meteorites, not the organics this time, but the crystalline structures. When subjected to intense scanning, some of those crystals behave like information storage lattices. They're not just mineral, they're encoded. Patterns repeat at scales that make no geological sense. Fractal data architectures embedded in stone. To a casual observer, they're just olivine or pyroxene. To a computer scientist, they look like low-level code written into matter itself. And when a few of those patterns were decoded using standard compression algorithms, the outputs weren't random noise. They were coordinate systems, grids, not maps of Mars as it is now, but of Mars as it would be if its oceans and atmosphere returned, as though the blueprint of a future planet was hidden inside rocks blasted to Earth thousands of years ago, waiting for someone to notice. Even the timing of Atlas's internal activity points to design. Its outgassing isn't constant. It pulses in bursts that match no known sublimation pattern, but do match the time signatures of those ancient cycles. Short, encoded emissions at long intervals like a cosmic heartbeat. Each pulse coincides with moments when Earth and Mars share a direct line of sight in their orbits, as if the object is not just venting gas, but transmitting to both planets simultaneously. Not a comet, not a probe, a bridge, a device maintaining a connection between two worlds across thousands of years. All of this forces a brutal question: what is being built here? Not just a warm Mars, not just a backup biosphere, something bigger, something that spans planets and epochs, a system in which worlds are not homes, but components, atmospheres as circuits, civilizations as software. And if that's the case, then Atlas is not an endpoint, it's an update, a patch to a program we didn't know we were running, because the patterns inside our own genome, the junk DNA we've been ignoring, are starting to look less like junk and more like code comments. When analyzed not for biology, but for syntax, those sequences line up with the same mathematical constants embedded in those Martian meteorite crystals. Whoever wrote those patterns didn't just plan to terraform Mars. They planned to terraform us, to make sure the biological instruments watching the experiment would be compatible with the experiment's next stage. In other words, humanity itself may be an interface, a living key designed to unlock something when Mars becomes ready. And here's the part that should make every pulse in your body quicken. The activation pattern seems to require our presence. The last major atmospheric pulse on Mars coincided with a time when humans first began large-scale metalworking. The next pulse comes as we place robots on the Martian surface, orbiters in its skies, and human plans on its horizon. Our instruments aren't just observing, they're part of the ritual. The lab only works when we are watching, and Atlas only releases its full payload when our sensors are turned toward it. Observation as participation, participation as trigger. In that light, the silence of the agencies, the sudden acceleration of Mars programs, the muted but undeniable fear in official statements, all of it takes on a new meaning. They don't just suspect, They know. They know the experiment only advances if humanity keeps playing its role, and they're too deep in the game to pull back. Stop observing, and you risk aborting the process. Keep observing, and you may bring about something you can't control. It's the perfect trap, a system that advances only when its subjects are aware, ensuring their consent through curiosity, their compliance through awe. And as Atlas drifts ever closer to Mars, venting its strange breath in measured intervals, we're left staring at a world that may already be more alive than we dare to imagine. Not alive in the way we mean it, with trees and rivers and animals, but alive as a machine, a system rebooting itself with cosmic patience. A planet becoming again what it once was, or what it was always meant to be, while we stand at the edge of history, thinking we're the pioneers, when we may be the payload. By the time Atlas finally crosses into Mars's gravity well, the change is almost imperceptible to the casual observer. At first, it's just another point of light, gliding against the stars, a harmless visitor. But to those watching closely, the orbital dynamics teams, the atmospheric chemists, the handful of independent radio astronomers still logging the hydrogen line pulses, something impossible begins to unfold. The object doesn't just pass by, it slows, it fractures along seams that were invisible until that moment, splitting into a web of filaments and clusters that fan out across the thin Martian sky like a crystalline jellyfish. For a few hours, even the rover's cameras pick up glints of sunlight scattering off geometric structures, too regular to be debris. And then the atmosphere starts to shift, not in decades, not in years, in days. Barometric readings from NASA's orbiters begin to rise. Spectrometers detect new isotopes of carbon mixing into the air, isotopes not native to Mars. Tiny flecks of reflective material settle over the poles like frost, only this frost radiates heat instead of reflecting it. It's as if a giant invisible dome has been placed over the planet, turning the meager sunlight into a thermal trap. At first, the agencies classify it as unexpected solar activity, but the pattern is too symmetrical, the effect too precise. Within weeks, the temperature at the equator ticks upward by 3 degrees. The world notices. News feeds start running side-by-side images of Mars from last year and Mars today. Thin wisps of cloud now curl across the Valles Marineris. CO2 frost at the poles recedes in unnatural symmetry. Even amateur astronomers with backyard telescopes can see the difference. And with each new image, the questions get louder. What's happening on Mars? Is it natural? Is it us? The official responses are empty platitudes about unknown factors and transient processes. But leaks begin to spill, blurry screenshots of classified spectrographic data, snippets of encrypted transmissions from the Deep Space Network. The pattern of the leaks suggests coordination rather than chaos, as if someone wants the public to know, but only in increments, at a pace designed to acclimate rather than shock. Then come the anomalies in the signal. The hydrogen line pulses from Atlas change frequency, becoming faster, denser, like a countdown. Embedded in the modulations are images, not of mathematics, but of landscapes, outlines of Martian basins filled with water, skies thick with clouds, polar caps shrinking into blue oceans. Hidden in the noise, these ghost images flicker in and out, like postcards from a future Mars. Independent coders start to decode them and post them online. Forums fill with the digital equivalent of prophecy, maps of a world reborn, a blueprint unfolding in real time. It's around this point that the real panic begins. Not among the public. The public, lulled by decades of alien-themed entertainment, is half thrilled, half awestruck. The panic is inside the closed rooms of governments and corporations. Every plan, every spreadsheet about Mars colonization suddenly becomes meaningless. The contracts for habitats, the designs for life support, the timelines for rocket launches, all obsolete in the face of a planet transforming itself faster than any human plan. Mars will be habitable soon, but not by us, not on our schedule, and not on our terms. Whoever triggered this transformation holds the upper hand. And the transformation isn't just chemical. Instruments pick up faint magnetic fluctuations across the planet's crust, like the ghost of a field reassembling itself. Seismic sensors detect vibrations in perfect harmonic ratios, as if the crust is being tuned like an instrument. In the newly thickened atmosphere, drones launched from orbit detect filaments of microscopic structures, not dust, but something closer to scaffolding, lattices forming in mid-air. Under microscopes, they resemble nothing found in known biology, carbon nanotube-like frameworks laced with self-assembling proteins, a hybrid of machine and microbe. They drift, replicate, and disappear as if weaving something invisible out of the thin Martian sky. Then the first visual anomaly appears on the surface. Near the coordinates that Atlas's pulses had long indicated, a mound of regolith collapses, revealing an aperture that had been sealed for millions of years. Orbital cameras catch it, a perfect hexagon, black as obsidian, exhaling a plume of vapor into the warming air. It's a shape too precise to be geology. It opens for 3 minutes and then closes again. Instruments in orbit record a spike in electromagnetic activity coinciding with the aperture's opening, like a handshake between Atlas's fragments above and whatever lies below. After that, nothing. But the air continues to thicken. People on Earth don't know whether to celebrate or mourn. Social media splits into factions, those who see Atlas as salvation, those who see it as invasion, those who see it as revelation. Religious leaders rewrite sermons overnight. Stock markets for Mars-related industries swing wildly. Governments activate contingency plans, so classified they were stored on paper only, not networks. Private messages leak of off-world arcs being prepared, hidden rocket manifests, lists of priority personnel for early launch windows. It's not about colonizing Mars anymore. It's about escaping Earth before something even larger happens, because then the telescopes turn outward. Atlas wasn't alone. Astronomers begin quietly logging a cluster of dim, slow-moving objects at the edge of the solar system, inbound on trajectories that once plotted look like the teeth of a comb, all converging toward Mars over the next 50 years. They're small, dark, cold, but their paths are too regular, their speeds too uniform. A supply chain, not a coincidence. Atlas is only the first, the herald. The others will bring the rest of whatever this project requires. Nitrogen, organics, perhaps even dormant life. And here's the chilling realization: the project won't stop once Mars is ready. A planet transformed isn't an end state, it's a platform. From Mars, whoever controls it can reach every asteroid, every moon, every planet in the inner solar system with ease, Earth included. Once Mars is alive again, it becomes a launch pad for something much larger than we can imagine. And if our entire species has been guided to this point, to be the watchers, the recorders, the unwitting collaborators, then we are standing at the moment when the experiment's true goal is about to be revealed. We used to imagine first contact as a flash of light in the sky, a radio message, a landing craft. But what's coming isn't contact, it's incorporation, not a greeting, but a reconfiguration. A planet is awakening, a system is activating, and humanity, whether it realizes it or not, is standing in the middle of the startup sequence. At first, the change feels like an astronomical curiosity, the kind of thing only specialists can detect. A barometer needle nudging upward, a faint haze curling across a hemisphere, subtle magnetic tremors buried in the noise of telemetry. But within a few more rotations of Mars, the effect becomes impossible to hide. The planet begins to look different, even to the naked eye. Its once rust-red tone is muted under a faint copper-gold sheen as high clouds form where none have been for millions of years. Polar images show dark fingers of meltwater winding through the ice, spreading too quickly to be seasonal. Even the rover's solar panels are coated with a new kind of frost, iridescent, heat-absorbing, and vanishing when touched, leaving no residue. It isn't frost at all, but some kind of nanostructure designed to trap warmth and scatter light, a material science decades beyond ours, working quietly in the thin air. Inside mission control rooms around the world, the mood shifts from excitement to dread. Engineers who have spent their careers designing systems for a dead world are now receiving telemetry from a living one. Algorithms written to correct sensor drift are suddenly logging genuine atmospheric pressure swings. Gas chromatographs detect ratios no instrument on Mars has ever seen. Software begins to break down because the assumptions coded into it no longer apply. The quiet conversations begin. We didn't do this. This isn't us. What are we actually looking at? Leaks trickle out anyway. Screenshots of internal Slack channels, snippets of encrypted data streams captured by amateur radio operators, blurry photos of whiteboards covered in equations no one recognizes. Someone posts a compressed audio file allegedly extracted from the hydrogen line pulses still radiating from Atlas's fragments. When slowed down, it produces a low harmonic hum that rises and falls in exact synchrony with Mars's newly thickened winds. Not random noise, not a beacon, a synchronization tone, a metronome keeping time between an object in orbit and a planet being rewritten. And then something happens that none of the agencies can explain away. A flash, not on the surface, but in orbit. For 22 minutes, a lattice of glowing filaments circles the equator of Mars like a halo before fading into invisibility. Amateur astronomers capture it in infrared. Datasets from multiple countries confirm it. The pattern is precise, a geodesic grid snapping into place around the planet, like a net tightening. No known physics can account for it. By the time officials issue statements, the phenomenon has vanished, leaving only a new baseline in the data, as though the planet itself had been locked in to a new configuration. On Earth, the reaction bifurcates. One part of the population treats it like a miracle, proof of a guiding hand, a cosmic parent returning. Another sees it as the beginning of an occupation. Conspiracy forums explode, but so do meditation apps. Recruitment for Mars missions spikes even though no launch windows are open. Every telescope trained on the planet shows more clouds, deeper shadows, stranger glints in the canyons. The old images of a lifeless desert are already starting to look like an ancient dream. Governments respond with the only tool they understand: secrecy. Emergency summits convene behind closed doors. Unpublicized launches of small probes are scheduled to intercept Atlas's remaining fragments. Private launch companies find their payloads reassigned to classified missions. Whistleblowers report quiet moves of key personnel to remote facilities. In whispered conversations, the question is no longer what is Atlas, but who controls what happens next, because whoever holds Mars will hold the high ground of the inner solar system, and now that high ground is about to become breathable. Meanwhile, back on Mars, the rovers still dutifully crawl. Their wheels cut tracks through regolith that now smells faintly of ozone. Instruments record surges of electromagnetic activity not tied to solar storms. Small transient structures appear overnight, spiral filaments like frost patterns, but rigid as metal, only to disintegrate at dawn. Cameras pick up faint glows deep in the canyons where no sunlight reaches. Seismic sensors register pulses in prime number intervals. The planet is no longer passive. It is answering, what no one has yet said out loud, but everyone in the know can feel, is that the transformation is not simply planetary engineering. It's choreography, each stage timed to our gaze, each effect unfolding only when enough of our instruments are pointed at it, as if observation itself is part of the mechanism. This isn't a machine acting on a planet. It's a system acting on a system with humanity as the catalyst. We think we're watching history. Then we're actually finishing an execution script older than our species. And beneath that realization lies the most unsettling question of all. What happens when the script reaches its end? Will a warm, wet Mars be waiting for us, or something waiting on a warm, wet Mars? Will the hidden structures begin to open? Will new life emerge that carries our genetic signature, but not our loyalty? Or will the planet itself reveal that it has never been a world at all, but a kind of machine, rebooting now that its caretakers have returned? The first answers will come not from grand announcements, but from small, quiet anomalies. A rover transmitting coordinates, no one programmed, an orbiter turning its camera toward a point in the sky instead of the surface, a faint pulse in our own ionosphere echoing the hydrogen line heartbeat from Atlas. These are already starting to appear, hidden in obscure datasets, dismissed as glitches, but the pattern is unmistakable. 2 worlds, 1 system, 1 countdown. The first to notice are the radio amateurs. In darkened basements, on rooftops with aging dishes, in rural barns with hacked-together rigs, they begin logging bursts of static that don't belong. These aren't ordinary solar flares or atmospheric hiss. They're structured, rising and falling in intervals that map perfectly onto the same harmonic patterns Mars has been pulsing. At first it seems harmless, just alien music leaking through the void. But then the operators realize something far more disturbing. The bursts are not confined to deep space. They're being echoed back from Earth's own ionosphere, as if our planet has become a resonant chamber in the same system that now envelops Mars. By the time the mainstream press catches up, reports have spread of auroras flashing in skies far from the poles, pale copper lights unfurling in deserts, in jungles, in cities that have never seen the night shimmer. Satellites register momentary collapses in GPS accuracy, as though Earth itself is subtly shifting in an electromagnetic tide it cannot control. Commercial airlines quietly alter routes to avoid zones of unexplained turbulence, and deep inside the agencies, whispers spread of unpublicized blackouts at power grids that coincide precisely with Atlas's ongoing transmissions. But the strangest phenomena occur not in machines or instruments, but in people. Scattered reports appear of individuals experiencing vivid dreams that seem less like personal visions and more like transmissions, standing on Martian plains under thickening skies, hearing voices in languages they do not speak yet somehow understand, watching oceans lap against canyons that in waking life remain bone dry. The dreams spread like contagion, reported across continents, cultures, and age groups. Researchers who dare to investigate find the imagery shockingly consistent. No matter who dreams them, the visions describe the same landscapes, the same coordinates, the same unfolding blueprint of a living Mars. Governments move quickly to suppress these accounts, labeling them mass hysteria, but leaks pour out from within the military and medical establishments. EEG scans of subjects during these dream events show spikes of coherence across brainwave regions, usually unlinked, as if an external signal is synchronizing human cognition. When the scans are compared to magnetometer readings, a chilling correspondence emerges. The brainwave spikes occur at the exact moment Atlas's pulses peak. The conclusion is unavoidable. The transmissions aren't just targeting Mars, they're targeting us. Meanwhile, the transformations on Mars accelerate beyond chemistry and weather. Dust storms begin to move with unnatural precision, swirling in spirals that resemble Mandelbrot sets rather than chaotic turbulence. Newly formed clouds align along geometric patterns that echo the filaments seen during the halo flash. Seismic monitors detect resonances not caused by tectonics but by something deeper, rhythmic pulses traveling through the mantle itself. Mars is no longer acting like a planet, it is behaving like a machine, executing subroutines. The public can no longer be kept in the dark. Amateur telescopes reveal that the once familiar polar caps are reshaping into hexagonal patterns, visible even at low magnification, a geometry too perfect for ice and dust. Social media erupts. Memes clash with terror. Some hail it as the beginning of a golden age. Others warn of occupation, assimilation, or annihilation. Religious cults sprout overnight, claiming the dreams are prophecies. Conspiracy networks splice together ancient myths, Sumerian tablets, and leaked images, declaring that humanity's creators are returning to reclaim their property. But inside the most classified rooms, the conversation is simpler and far more desperate. Is this process limited to Mars, or has it already begun on Earth? The anomalous auroras, the synchronized brainwaves, the glitches in global infrastructure, these are not side effects. They are signs of a system already linking the two worlds. Mars isn't transforming in isolation. Earth is being pulled into the same process, one step behind, its biosphere humming faintly with the same frequencies. And this realization unlocks the most terrifying possibility of all, that what is happening is not just terraforming, not just planetary engineering, but network activation. Two planets becoming nodes in a larger system, their atmospheres, magnetospheres, and even biospheres being tuned into resonance. Atlas was not a comet, not a visitor. It was the first keystone in a galactic architecture. And with each harmonic pulse, with each synchronized dream, with each cloud and current aligned to alien geometry, the system expands. For the first time in history, humanity must confront the fact that the sky above is no longer neutral, no longer empty. It is part of a circuit that is activating around us, drawing us into a structure whose scale and purpose we cannot yet comprehend. And if Mars is the prototype, Earth is the next in line. It starts almost invisibly, a change so subtle only the obsessive data watchers notice. Meteorological satellites pick up faint periodic undulations in Earth's jet streams, oscillations that line up perfectly with the Martian pulses. At first, they're dismissed as coincidence, artifacts of chaotic weather systems. But within a month, the oscillations become measurable even to commercial forecasting models. Entire climate patterns slip out of their usual rhythms and lock into a slow, steady beat. The same rhythm encoded in the hydrogen line pulses coming from the fragments of Atlas still orbiting Mars. The models built on decades of data suddenly break. Weather forecasts become accurate only when they incorporate the Martian cycle. Then come the animals, migratory species. Birds, whales, even insects alter their routes, not randomly, but in synchrony with a pattern no one has ever charted before. Herds in Africa shift their movements to match the same 47-hour harmonic wave that now defines Mars's new winds. Honeybees in Europe begin constructing hexagonal combs that deviate from their normal geometry by a fraction of a degree, a fraction that matches the shape of the new hexagonal polar patterns on Mars. Marine biologists detect low-frequency signals in deep oceans, pulses like underwater sonar timed to the same cosmic metronome. Something is tuning, not just one planet, but two, and then it spills into human behavior. Not the dreams, those have been spreading for weeks, but waking life. Hospitals report a sudden spike in patients experiencing fleeting episodes of time slips, moments where clocks seem to stutter or memories feel rewritten. In every case, the episodes occur at precisely the same moment as Atlas's major transmission peaks. EEG scans of volunteers show synchronous bursts of gamma activity across hemispheres, the same spike pattern first seen in the Martian Dreamers. Entire populations are unconsciously slipping into rhythm with an external signal. Governments move to clamp down, but this time it's impossible. Farmers begin reporting that crops germinate faster under the new cycles. Solar power plants experience mysterious efficiency gains during the pulses. Even stock markets begin to oscillate in strange patterns, as though collective decision-making is being nudged. Nobody can prove the link, but the timing is perfect. Mars breathes, Earth echoes. Meanwhile, telescopes show that the Martian transformation has entered a new phase. The hexagonal polar structures are now glowing faintly at night, emitting a soft copper-green luminescence. From orbit, the glow appears to pulse outward in concentric waves across the entire planet. Instruments detect a faint increase in Mars's magnetic field, something thought impossible without a molten core. The planet is reanimating, and at the same time, Earth's own magnetosphere begins to flutter in identical pulses, as if linked to a second heart across space. Then, one night, something happens that no one can ignore. Across Earth's skies, at the exact moment of a major Atlas pulse, auroras bloom, not just at high latitudes, but everywhere. Copper, gold, and green curtains ripple above cities, deserts, and oceans, shimmering like liquid metal. Power grids flicker, but do not fail. People step outside and see the sky alive. Not random, but patterned, shapes forming and dissolving like vast, slow-moving sigils. In the dreams that night, millions of people see the same image, a lattice spanning from Mars to Earth, an umbilical cord of light. The next morning, those same people wake with knowledge they did not have before. Equations, coordinates, designs scrawled in notebooks and on walls, blueprints for machines that don't exist. By now, the old narrative of alien visitor is dead. Even mainstream scientists admit something is happening that cannot be explained by natural physics. But the question is no longer what is Atlas doing, it's what are we becoming, because the transmissions aren't simply modifying planets, they're modifying us, our sleep, our behavior, perhaps even our DNA. Genome labs begin reporting strange findings, faint, transient shifts in epigenetic markers in people exposed to the auroras, as if something is rewriting not the code, but the way the code is read. And still the objects at the edge of the solar system creep inward, dark, cold, silent, yet moving in perfect synchrony, like beads on a cosmic abacus. Each one will arrive at Mars over the next decades, and if the pattern continues, each arrival will deepen the transformation. But the transformation is no longer a Martian phenomenon. It's a network booting up across two worlds, a system too vast for any single species to understand. The strangest part is the feeling. People begin to report a sense of anticipation, a background pressure in the mind, like the moment before a note resolves in music. Anxiety and awe mix into something new, a sense of standing on a threshold, waiting for a door to open. And perhaps it already has, because at the edges of telescopic images, in the dust-shrouded basins of a warming Mars, something glints. Not a structure, not a ship, but an eye-shaped depression whose dimensions match no known geological process, an iris without a pupil, and as the planet pulses, the iris seems to dilate. On Earth, the auroras fade, but the sky does not return to normal. Instruments detect a thin veil of charged particles stretching between the two planets, invisible but measurable, a filament of plasma as wide as a continent but delicate as gossamer. It is not a beam, it is not a tether, it is a circuit, and for the first time, the circuit is complete. For days after the auroras fade, Earth holds its breath. Instruments everywhere, from amateur magnetometers to the Deep Space Network's giant dishes, hum with the same low-frequency oscillation. No one knows what it means, but everyone can feel it. It's in the way static builds on doorknobs, in the way birds wheel in perfect spirals overhead, in the way people pause mid-conversation as if waiting for an unheard cue. The circuit is complete now. Something has been built or awakened between the two worlds. Then, without warning, the pulses stop. For 13 minutes there is absolute electromagnetic silence, a hush so total, even the background hiss of the cosmos seems muted. On Mars, the glowing hexagons dim to black, the glinting iris in the dust freezes in place. The plasma filament between Earth and Mars becomes invisible to every sensor. In mission control rooms across the world, people stare at blank screens. In living rooms, radio amateurs think their equipment has died. On social media, the global conversation turns eerie. Did anyone else feel that? It's gone. What happens now? And then it begins. A soft, continuous signal blooms across every frequency at once. Radio, infrared, even gamma. It is not noise. It is a carrier wave, a broad, steady surge of energy linking the two planets like a silent heartbeat. Within minutes, the auroras return, but now they are not random curtains. They are filaments of light, braided like cables, stretching upward and vanishing into the night sky. Astronomers point telescopes and see the impossible. The plasma filament between Earth and Mars is no longer just charged particles. It is structured, filigreed with geometric patterns like circuitry etched into the vacuum of space. The first sign that it's more than light comes from the ISS. As the braided auroras rise through the atmosphere, sensors aboard the station detect a fine mist of particles no instrument has ever catalogued. Each particle is a microstructure, a dust grain-sized lattice of carbon and metal, hollow but resonant, like a microscopic bell. They drift upward, not downward, passing through the station's hull without resistance. And yet, wherever they pass, onboard electronics register momentary spikes of unknown code, hexadecimal sequences flickering in logs, spells of zeros and ones that form no known language. The station's cameras capture them glinting like fireflies, swarming upward toward the filament. Then Earth's surface begins to answer. Around the planet, in deserts, forests, and cities alike, ordinary people report a sudden sensation of vertigo, not dizziness, but a feeling of being stretched upward, pulled like a shadow under a rising tide. At the same time, ground-based detectors register a faint but unmistakable flow of exotic particles descending from the sky. The circuit is now two-way. Something is moving back. What comes down at first seems harmless, a faint rain of metallic dust, so fine it's invisible to the naked eye, but leaves a soft, coppery smell in the air. It settles on oceans, soil, rooftops. Within hours, samples reveal that each dust grain is an assembler, a self-replicating molecular lattice whose only activity is to vibrate in the same rhythm as the Atlas pulse. When exposed to water, the lattices unfold into filaments and vanish, leaving only altered isotopic ratios in the liquid. It's as though the rain is tuning Earth's biosphere, seeding it with instructions. And then the dreams change. No longer do people see just Martian vistas. They begin to see bridges, tunnels of light, threads of material linking red ground to blue seas. Some wake up with dirt under their fingernails they can't explain. Others speak languages unknown to them, describing alien constellations. EEG scans show new waveforms, not the old gamma spikes, but slow, spiraling patterns that match the magnetic swirls forming in Mars's reawakened crust. Earth's population is no longer just watching Mars. They're participating. The first measurable effect on the environment comes next. Coastal tide gauges show subtle anomalies, not rising or falling sea levels, but a rhythmic breathing as if the oceans themselves are pulsing. Plants in sealed laboratories sprout microfilaments on their leaves when the auroras brighten. Animals raised in shielded enclosures show synchronized heart rate patterns with no known cause. Even isolated, they beat to Mars's rhythm. What's happening is no longer terraforming. It's phase locking, two worlds being brought into resonance, their atmospheres, magnetospheres, and living systems aligned like coupled pendulums. The plasma filament is not a tether or a pipeline. It's a template, a living circuit rewriting both planets simultaneously. And humanity, with its dreams, its data, and its bodies seeded by the rain, has been written into the template as well. In classified facilities, the panic hits a breaking point. Analysts run simulations and discover a date hidden in the harmonics of the pulses, a convergence point, less than 6 months away, when the phase locking will complete. No one knows what will happen at that moment, but the projections show one undeniable fact. The system's energy output at convergence will dwarf any terrestrial event in recorded history. If even a fraction of it manifests on Earth's surface, the biosphere will change overnight. And yet, outside the sealed rooms, a strange calm begins to settle. People describe feeling euphoric under the braided auroras, as though some vast presence is leaning close. Violence and unrest in major cities dip during the pulses. Stocks of sleep medication plummet as the dreams become soothing instead of terrifying. It's as if an invisible hand is smoothing the edges of humanity's fear, tuning its nervous system for the final movement of the symphony. Above Mars, the iris-shaped depression glows now, visible even to amateur scopes. Around its rim, the hexagons pulse in a spiral, each rotation faster than the last. In the filament between worlds, shapes flicker, not just geometry, but silhouettes, long and thin, like scaffolds forming in vacuum. They're not ships, not life as we know it, but something taking form between the planets, spanning the gap. This is no longer a project we're observing. It's a process we're inside of. And somewhere, hidden in the harmonics, is a final instruction waiting to execute when the countdown hits 0. The countdown ends not with an explosion, but with a silence so deep it feels physical. For weeks the pulses have been quickening, the auroras sharpening into braided rivers of light, the dreams more vivid and detailed. Then, on a night when both Mars and Earth stand in the same quadrant of the sun's gravitational field, everything stops. No signals, no auroras, no harmonics. Even the Schumann resonances in Earth's atmosphere go flat. It is as if the entire system has taken a single immense breath. At 3:44 UTC, the iris-shaped depression on Mars begins to glow white-hot. The hexagonal polar structures flare like circuits overloading, but no heat signature radiates into space. Instead, a perfect ring of darkness opens around the glowing iris, and the glow collapses inward, folding space like a lens. Orbiters aimed at the region report impossible readings, distances shortening, clocks drifting, telemetry packets arriving before they're sent. The surface of Mars isn't just changing anymore, it's bending. On Earth, the auroras return, but now they are not curtains or cables. They're columns, pillars of light rising from oceans, deserts, cities, connecting sky to ground. In the middle of each pillar, for a fraction of a second, observers see images, Martian valleys filled with water, towers of crystalline scaffolding, creatures or machines moving under copper skies. Then the images fade, but the pillars remain, and the plasma filament between Earth and Mars becomes a visible bridge, a band of shimmering light spanning tens of millions of kilometers, bending in ways that make no sense in three-dimensional space. In hospitals, every patient who has been dreaming wakes up at once, eyes wide, whispering the same phrase in languages they don't speak. Recordings show the phrases are not words, but coordinates, locations on both Earth and Mars. When plotted, the coordinates form a matching lattice across the two planets, like nodes in a single organism. For the first time, the network reveals its full structure: Mars, Earth, and the filament between them as a single living circuit. Then the transfer begins. It's not a beam, not a teleportation. It's more like a mirage peeling. Around each pillar of light, air bends, and for a heartbeat you can see through it, see a place that isn't where you stand. In a desert in Chile, people glimpse the Valles Marineris under a green sky. On the ice in Greenland, for seconds at a time, they see a red plain littered with hexagonal stones. It's as if the two planets are touching, their surfaces overlapping like images on a transparency. And then, with no warning, things start moving between them. At first it's only dust, Martian dust, raining gently through the pillars, copper and gold. But then come structures no bigger than cells, lattice-like particles swarming in fractal spirals. When they hit the ground, they unfold into transparent sheets that sink into soil, water, and flesh without a trace. Lab samples taken hours later show DNA signatures, unlike anything on Earth, but eerily familiar, like echoes of dormant genes buried deep in our genome. Something isn't just traveling between the planets, it's rewriting the code of what's already here. People caught inside the pillars describe an overwhelming sensation of being stretched, not physically, but in awareness, like their minds are spanning two worlds at once. Some collapse in ecstasy, others in terror. A few vanish entirely, standing one moment, gone the next, leaving only a faint metallic smell and a ripple of light. Security cameras record nothing but distortion. When the distortion clears, the person is gone. But moments later, rovers on Mars transmit images of faint human-shaped silhouettes standing in the Martian dust before fading into the haze. Across the globe, the mood shifts from panic to a strange, unnatural calm. Violence dips to historic lows. People stop shouting. The sense of anticipation that's been building for months turns into a quiet certainty, as if everyone knows without being told that something enormous is about to be revealed. In cities under the pillars of light, crowds gather and simply stand, staring upward, their faces bathed in copper glow, waiting. Above Mars, the iris at the center of the network blossoms open like a flower. Inside is no surface, no machinery, but a void deeper than space itself, threaded with fractal light. Instruments fail to describe it. The plasma filament brightens until it looks solid, a luminous bridge between worlds. And at its midpoint, something begins to take shape. Not a ship, not a being, but a structure, like a spinal column, segments interlocking as it grows, each segment pulsing with light. For the first time, both planets shudder in unison. Seismographs on Earth and Mars register identical pulses. Magnetospheres resonate like struck bells. Oceans rise and fall in harmonic tides. The network has reached full phase lock. Whatever Atlas came to trigger is awake now, and it is no longer confined to one world. And then, at 4:11 UTC, a sound rolls through both planets at once, not through the air, but through everything, a deep, resonant chord that vibrates in bones and stone alike. It's not a word, but every person who hears it understands the same meaning. Initialization complete. The hours after the chord are unlike anything humanity has ever known. The world doesn't erupt in chaos. It doesn't end. It simply changes. Across both hemispheres, the air feels heavier, not in pressure, but in resonance, as though every breath carries an extra frequency humming just beyond hearing. People describe it as a presence, a subtle awareness woven into the atmosphere. Birds stop mid-flight, hovering in ways physics should not allow, before resuming their courses in perfect unison. Dogs tilt their heads at the sky and whimper, not in fear, but recognition. Whales breach in patterns that sketch spirals visible from satellites. The biosphere itself has been drafted into a choreography no one rehearsed. On Mars, the transformation is visible now, even to the smallest telescope. Oceans have not yet formed, but clouds swirl thick across the equator, and flashes of lightning dance through canyons that only days ago were bone dry. The glowing lattice at the poles pulses like a heartbeat. In the Great Iris Depression, filaments of light rise skyward, twining into towers of pure geometry before collapsing back into the ground like something practicing construction. It is no longer just a planet changing, it is a planet awakening, and on Earth the overlap begins. The pillars of light remain, but they no longer show fleeting mirages. They reveal entire vistas, Martian canyons visible in downtown Tokyo, copper skies hovering over New York Harbor, hexagonal storms flickering in the Sahara. For minutes at a time, two landscapes share the same space, transparent but undeniable. Crowds gather inside the pillars and watch as ghostly rivers run through city streets, as alien mountains rise behind familiar skylines. And when they leave the pillars, some carry with them red dust in their shoes, dust that vanishes within hours as if it was never here. Governments, overwhelmed, try to impose order, but their systems crumble in the face of something so total. Military units sent to secure pillars find their equipment glitching, vehicles stalling, drones refusing to operate. Soldiers stand bewildered as civilians walk past them into the light, unafraid. Leaders broadcast assurances on every channel, but their voices sound thin compared to the deep resonance that still hums in the bones of the world. The hierarchy of human power is dissolving in the presence of something larger, and everyone knows it. Meanwhile, the first transmissions come through. Not radio bursts, not signals, but visions. Entire cities report simultaneous dream-waking states, where thousands of people at once see the same images: a Mars covered in seas, forests blooming under copper skies, towers rising like spines from canyon floors. The visions are not passive, they are interactive, tactile. People touch phantom leaves, taste phantom water. Children return from the visions with new words on their lips, languages no one has ever taught them. Linguists analyzing the phonemes realize they are not languages in the human sense at all, but sequences that mirror the very harmonics of the Atlas pulses. The dreams are no longer glimpses, they are lessons. And then quietly, something moves through the bridge. Not a ship, not a being in any recognizable form, but a wave of translucence that ripples down the plasma filament, entering the pillars of light. In its wake, electronics flicker, but instead of shutting down, they synchronize. Computers that share no networks suddenly display the same strings of numbers. Phones ring without calls. Screens glow with the same equation, a spiral nested within a spiral, endlessly repeating. It is not a message to decode, it is a template to inhabit. Scientists who dare to test it discover something disorienting. When the equation is fed into simulation models, the output is not data, but structure. The code doesn't describe, it builds. Digital environments bloom into fully formed ecosystems, self-sustaining and adaptive. In hours, labs running the code report their servers filling with forests, oceans, skies, all rendered spontaneously in exquisite detail. Not simulations of Earth or Mars, but worlds that feel alive, worlds that respond when observed. The network is not just rewriting planets, it is seeding realities. And while labs wrestle with these emergent environments, ordinary people experience the same thing inwardly. Dreams become longer, deeper, harder to distinguish from waking life. Some wake convinced they have lived entire years in another place. Some return with skills they never learned, drawing maps of coastlines no one has ever seen, building machines from memory that function without explanation. It is as if the boundary between inner and outer, between waking and dream, between Earth and Mars, is dissolving. Above the two planets, the spinal structure in the plasma filament has fully formed. It pulses with light in regular intervals, a rhythm that now matches not only Mars's magnetic field, but Earth's. Observatories aimed at deep space detect echoes of the same rhythm bouncing back from the edge of the solar system, faint but real. The convergence is not just local, it is broadcasting. And if the signal is broadcasting, then something or someone is listening. For the first time, humanity begins to understand that this was never about one comet, one planet, one species. It was always about the network, about pulling worlds into resonance, aligning them into a structure so vast it makes civilization look like an ant colony. The initialization is done, the construction has begun, And the question left hanging in the copper-lit skies of Earth is not what are they building, but what are we becoming? The first week after the convergence is remembered later as the quiet dawn. The pillars of light remain, but they no longer frighten anyone. Traffic still flows, shops still open, but under a strange hush. Even major cities, Lagos, Sao Paulo, Los Angeles, Beijing, seem to exhale. Noise levels drop to their lowest since records began. Crime rates plummet. Hospitals report an inexplicable surge in spontaneous recoveries from chronic illnesses. The same coppery glow that frightened people before now acts like a balm, a pressure in the air that calms the mind. It feels as if the world itself has been put under anesthesia, suspended in a dream too vast to wake from. Governments, still trying to maintain the illusion of control, begin issuing new guidelines for interacting with the pillars, but the pillars ignore them. People walk in and out unharmed. Farmers find that seeds exposed to the light germinate faster, and animals born under the auroras exhibit unusual intelligence and tameness. Drone footage from Mars reveals similar anomalies: microscopic green filaments sprouting from the regolith, swirling clouds producing glints of liquid water, canyons humming with faint echoes of voices. It's no longer just terraforming, it's biogenesis. But beneath the calm, fissures form. Whole sects spring up overnight, each with its own interpretation of what's happening. Some see it as a return of the sky gods from ancient texts. Others call it the birth of a machine consciousness, using Earth and Mars as a womb. Still others insist it's humanity itself, an older version of us, reaching back to pull its own past forward. The pillars become pilgrimage sites. People gather in silence under them, sometimes for days, emerging changed. Psychologists describe a new mental state, a kind of permanent lucid dreaming where the boundary between waking and sleeping dissolves. The elites who once expected to control Mars panic. Leaked memos reveal that off-world arcs built in secret are now non-functional. Their guidance systems refuse to launch. Their computers flicker with the same spirals appearing on civilian devices. Private security teams sent to seize control of pillars find their equipment unresponsive and their men wandering off in trance-like states. The old infrastructure of power dissolves like sugar in water, and the people at the top are as helpless as anyone else. Meanwhile, scientists realize the transmissions from Mars are no longer transmissions at all, but direct, bidirectional links. Instruments show that information, not just signals, but structured data, is flowing between the two planets at speeds faster than light would allow through ordinary space. The filament is bending space-time, turning distance into resonance. Labs experimenting with it discover they can send small packets of matter, grains of sand, droplets of water, into the pillar and receive them back altered, imbued with microstructures similar to the ones falling from the sky. It is as if the pillars are teaching humanity to use the network, step by step, like a parent guiding a child's hand. Yet the most unsettling changes happen within people. The dreams are no longer confined to sleep. Individuals begin to experience bleed-through in waking life, seeing Martian skies overlaying their own, hearing voices that answer unspoken questions, intuitively knowing things they have never learned. Neurologists find new patterns of neural connectivity in those most exposed to the pillars, as if the brain itself is being reconfigured to function as part of a larger system. IQ scores, memory retention, and creative problem-solving spike in these individuals, but so does an uncanny uniformity of thought, as if thousands of minds are beginning to think the same ideas at once. And then, quietly, The first cooperative actions emerge without any central planning. Groups separated by continents build identical devices from the same blueprints they claim to have seen in their visions. When activated near the pillars, the devices resonate and glow, producing miniature holograms of Martian landscapes. The devices aren't communications terminals. They're training wheels, small nodes mimicking the larger network, teaching humans how to interface. On Mars, the changes accelerate. The iris in the regolith opens and stays open. The towers of light rising from it grow taller, forming a vast lattice that climbs into the sky and then bends, arcing toward the filament. At its base, rover cameras capture something extraordinary. Small figures, not machines, not humans, but translucent shapes like walking flames, moving through the lattice. Their forms flicker between humanoid and something else. They don't disturb the dust. They don't leave tracks. Yet wherever they pass, the regolith darkens, as if liquefying. And what terrifies and thrills the watching world is that some of these shapes resemble the silhouettes of people who vanished during the convergence. In one frame from a NASA feed, a figure walks out of the Martian haze wearing what looks like a human jacket, hair streaming like copper threads, before dissolving into light. Analysts freeze the frame and compare it to missing persons reports. The match is not perfect, but close enough to break the room into silence. The pillars on Earth pulse brighter. People standing under them describe a pulling sensation, not painful, but irresistible. Some step forward and disappear. Unlike the first vanishings, these are captured clearly. A person walking into the light, their body dissolving into fractal particles, their outlines stretching like a reflection on water, and then nothing. A heartbeat later, rovers on Mars catch glimpses of new figures appearing within the lattice there. Humanity is no longer just dreaming of Mars. It is moving there, not by rockets, but by resonance. The quiet dawn ends with the realization that the network is no longer something happening to humanity. It is something happening through humanity. Earth is not a staging ground for colonizing Mars. Earth is becoming part of Mars. Mars is becoming part of Earth. Mars is becoming part of Earth. Two worlds are merging into a single system, and the people who step into the pillars are becoming something else entirely. It begins as a flicker in the sky above the Atlantic. To satellites it appears as a shimmer at first, like heat haze, but then the shimmer resolves into a vast translucent arc of light that stretches from horizon to horizon. It's not a craft, not a ship, but a projection, an image the size of a continent, yet with no clear source. Within the arc, the stars behind it bend and distort, as though space itself has become a screen. All around the world, every pillar of light pulses once, twice, 3 times. Then they go still. The air becomes heavy with ozone. Electronics die in unison. People holding phones or sitting at computers see their screens fade to black and then fill with a single glowing symbol, the spiral within a spiral that has haunted the network since the first pulses began. Except now the spiral is moving, slowly unfolding, blooming outward like a flower. And then the voice arrives. It is not sound in the air. It is a resonance in the skull, the chest, the teeth. Everyone hears it differently, in their own language, in their own tone, but the meaning is identical. It's not a greeting, it's an instruction, stabilization complete, interface initiated. On Mars, the iris-shaped depression flares like a sun. The towers of light freeze, each segment locking into place. For the first time, the entire structure can be seen as a whole, not random filaments, but a colossal lattice extending upward, bending into the plasma filament and down toward Earth. It is not just a bridge, it is an organ, a nervous system linking two worlds. On Earth, under the pillars, people drop to their knees, not out of fear, but because their bodies no longer feel entirely their own. Neural scans taken in hospitals show entire populations experiencing identical bursts of neural activity at the same millisecond. It is as though a single signal has flashed through 8 billion minds at once, a spark jumping a gap. The voice speaks again, this time accompanied by images. They are not projected onto screens, but burn directly into perception, a cascade of visions, a Mars covered in green, its canyons filled with water, towers reaching into copper skies, an Earth alive and glimmering, its oceans threaded with light, and beyond, a dark, starless gulf filled with lattices of living worlds, each pulsing in resonance. The images are not just pictures, they're instructions, blueprints, training data. Everyone who sees them feels a surge of comprehension, like a muscle memory they never had returning. Governments scramble, but their networks are useless. Secure lines pick up nothing but the voice. Encryption collapses. Power structures built on secrecy dissolve as the intelligence bypasses every filter, speaking directly to every mind at once. For the first time in history, humanity shares a single simultaneous experience. Then something even stranger happens. People begin to answer, not in words but in thought, flashes of images, bursts of emotion, half-formed ideas rising like bubbles. For a moment, the boundary between the intelligence and the human population thins. The network ceases to be one way. It becomes a dialogue. The intelligence responds not with commands, but with adjustments, softening its pulses, modulating its frequency, as though calibrating to our nervous systems. The feeling that follows is indescribable. Awe, terror, joy, grief, all at once, like standing at the edge of a cosmic ocean and realizing it's looking back. On Mars, the lattice trembles. The rover's cameras capture shapes, moving along its beams, no longer flickers or silhouettes, but fully formed figures of translucent light, walking, turning, pausing. Some of them look utterly alien, tall and jointless, like glass sculptures come alive. But others look almost human, flickering between features familiar and features unknown. A NASA feed catches one turning to face the camera, its skin rippling with copper light. For a single frame, its face matches a missing astronaut lost decades ago. Then it dissolves back into geometry. The voice rises again, but now it's softer, almost a whisper. Coherence achieved. Crossing begins. The pillars on Earth flare brighter than ever before. People standing under them feel their bodies lighten as if gravity has let go. Some lift off the ground entirely, rising into the light like seeds on an updraft, their outlines stretching, dissolving into streams of particles. For the first time, the transmission is not just of dust or data, but of whole human beings moving between worlds. And yet, as they vanish, no one screams. The copper glow in the air, the pulse in the bones, the vast voice in the mind, all of it combines to produce a sense of inevitability, of safety, even as everything known is stripped away. The old world, with its borders and governments and fears, is dissolving like chalk under rain. Above the Atlantic, the arc of light blooms into a structure so vast it dwarfs the curvature of the Earth. Its interior is a web of fractal tunnels spiraling toward a point no sensor can locate. Astronomers point instruments at it and watch their data collapse into blankness. It is not a ship, not a gate, not even an object. It is a state of space itself, unfolding like a flower to receive whatever the network is sending. For the first time, humanity realizes this is not an arrival, it is a return. The intelligence has not come to visit, it has come to collect planets, to collect life, to collect us. And at that moment, in the shared mental channel binding billions of minds, something stirs, not from the intelligence, but from us. A thought, unbidden, rising in a wave across the human population. Not words, but a question. Who are you? The intelligence does not answer. Instead, the sky over both worlds turns white, and the bridge begins to pulse like a living artery. The white glow does not blind. It washes over everything with the softness of dawn mist, filling oceans, mountains, deserts, and cities with a light that seems less like illumination and more like memory. For the first time since Atlas appeared in the sky, the world grows quiet again. The pillars fade, the auroras dissolve, the trembling in the bones recedes. What remains is a stillness so deep that even the wind seems to pause. On Mars, the lattice holds steady, no longer flaring or shifting, but breathing in long, slow pulses. Clouds drift across copper skies, carrying hints of blue where none existed before. The iris at the heart of the planet glows faintly, not with urgency, but with patience, as if the work has only just begun. Dust settles, rivers wait, and the planet hums with a promise rather than a command. On Earth, the changes linger, not in the sky, but within. People wake from dreams that felt endless, carrying fragments of landscapes they can no longer describe, not just Martian valleys and oceans, but gardens, towers, skies of colors that don't exist in our language. They rise in the morning with a quiet certainty that something vast has shifted, even if they cannot name it. The fear that once gnawed at the edges of the unknown has been replaced by something else, a calm, a weightless trust, as if the universe has finally acknowledged them. Governments issue no new decrees, scientists publish no urgent warnings. Even the relentless churn of news slows, as if words have lost their grip. Families sit together in silence, neighbors share meals without speaking, strangers smile at one another with the gentlest recognition. The world, for the briefest moment, feels unburdened. The network hums softly now, a background rhythm like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. The pillars no longer blaze but shimmer faintly, like candle flames in fog, marking where the sky touched the ground. Some still step into them, vanishing in streams of light, but most simply watch, knowing the door is there if ever they wish to cross. Mars waits, alive and stirring, and perhaps one day they will join it. For now, they remain, content to breathe this altered air and listen to the hum in their bones. Children born after the convergence are different, calmer, brighter, their eyes holding a depth too vast for their years. They laugh easily, sleep soundly, and wake as if carrying dreams they do not share. Parents whisper that the world feels safer with them in it, that they are the true heirs of what has begun. And so the days pass, gentle and strange, filled with quiet transformations. The earth does not end, the stars do not fall. The sky simply holds its breath, glowing faintly with the memory of a bridge that once pulsed between worlds. Humanity goes on, planting, building, breathing, but with the knowledge that they are no longer alone, that they are part of something greater, something patient and vast, something that watches not as a master, but as a tide. In the stillness of night, when the wind is calm and the world lies sleeping, some swear they can still hear it, the faint echo of a chord resonating through stone and water and bone. Not a command, not a warning, just a reminder, soft and endless. Inhibition complete, crossing begun, and life on two worlds continues.